All right, guys. So let me know if you can hear me, if everything is working out good. Want to make sure that we're all set up before this debate starts. Let me know if everything is good. Can you hear me? I got my popcorn ready too. My invisible popcorn. My water. My water is my popcorn. So, yeah, let me know if you guys can hear me. Okay, it works. Okay, perfect. Perfectly. Perfect. All right, so we're going to get into this debate. You guys should already know how I feel about this going into it. I think that all Trump has to do is to make sure that Kamala Harris has to explain her flip-flops. That's it. And make sure that the American people know that she is weak, okay? She's weak, and remind them of how good the Trump administration was, how good America was under his leadership. That's all he really has to do at this point, okay? Kamala Harris has to perform at a level that is above average, right? She cannot have a mediocre performance. If she has a mediocre performance versus Trump, I think that's a nail for her, okay? She has to really show up and to do what she said she was going to do, right? She claimed that she was going to prosecute the case, okay? Say it to my face, right? This is what Kamala was talking about. She knows it's tight. So we're going to see. I think that Kamala's going to be nervous as hell, to be quite honest with you. I think that she's going to be rusty. This is not something that she does often. She has not faced any pushback. She has not done any interviews. And I think that's for a reason. I think it's because she is afraid, okay? And I think we're going to see that during this debate, or at least that's what I hope, right? I hope that we see that, okay? Because Kamala doesn't do a good job at hiding her emotions, okay, how she feels. I mean, it's very easy to read her body language. And during this debate with no crowd, no audience, it's going to be 2 minutes, all eyes on you. I'm hoping that the same thing that happened to Joe Biden is going to happen to Kamala Harris. Okay, that's what I hope. The camera's going to be on her. She's going to look nervous. She's going to look afraid. Okay. Did you guys hear about Kamala Harris making the podium smaller? Right. So apparently she made the podium smaller so she didn't look as small compared to Trump, right? This is the type of stuff that the Kamala campaign is thinking about, right? They're obsessed with Kamala's image and her brand, right? They don't want her to appear weak next to Trump, okay? So, you know, I personally think that they're totally overthinking this, and because they're totally overthinking it, it increases the chances of her bombing, right? Having an absolute disaster, okay? This is what I think. So we will see. Okay, but I'm super excited, guys. My gut feeling is that this is going to be the only debate. I think after this, Kamala Harris is going to have a hard time signing up to do this again. But who knows, right? I just think that this is what they're planning for. So I don't know, man. It's just one of those things where I'm ready for the election to be over, to be honest with you, okay? I'm ready for it to be over, okay? I just want Trump to be president again. And having to go through all this stuff is kind of annoying, but at the same time, it's entertaining, it's exciting. So we'll see what happens. But I'm going to go ahead and tune in to the broadcast because it seems like the debate is about to start.
Vision, keeping an eye on everything. We are going to be fact-checking on our live blog. It's all going to be happening right here. The debate now just 10 seconds away. And we will be back with our post-game show as soon as it's over. We are going to toss it right now to David Muir and Lindsay Day.
Let me know if you guys can hear the volume
Tonight,
good.
the high-stakes showdown here in Philadelphia between Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump. Their first face-to-face meeting in this presidential election, their first face-to-face meeting ever.
A historic race for president upended just weeks ago. President Biden withdrawing after his last debate. Donald Trump now up against a new opponent.
The candidates separated by the smallest of margins, essentially tied in the polls nationally and in the key battlegrounds.
Let me know if you guys can hear
including right here in Pennsylvania, all still very much in play. The ABC News presidential debate starts right now.
This is an ABC News special. The most consequential moment of this campaign. Kamala Harris.
Together, we will charge.
Donald Trump.
Let me know if the volume is good. I want to make sure everybody can hear it. Everybody can hear me. I want to make sure everything is good before this thing starts.
News presidential debate. Here now, David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
Good evening, I'm David Muir, and thank you for joining us for tonight's ABC News presidential debate. We want to welcome viewers watching on ABC and around the world tonight. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump are just moments away from taking the stage in this unprecedented race for president.
And I'm Lindsay Davis. Tonight's meeting could be the most consequential event of their campaigns, with Election Day now less than 2 months away. For Vice President Kamala Harris, this is her first debate since President Biden withdrew from the race on July 21st. Of course, that decision followed his debate against President Donald Trump in June. Since then, this race has taken on an entirely new dynamic.
And that brings us to the rules of tonight's debate. 90 minutes with 2 commercial breaks. No topics or questions have been shared with the campaigns. The candidates will have 2 minutes to answer questions, and this is the clock. That's what they'll be seeing. 2 minutes for rebuttals and 1 minute for follow-ups, clarifications, or responses. Their microphones will only be turned on when it's their turn to speak. No pre-written notes allowed. There is no audience here tonight in this hall at the National Constitution Center. This is an intimate setting for 2 candidates who have never met. President
Trump won the coin toss. He chose to deliver the final closing statement of the evening. Vice President Harris selected the podium to the right.
So let's now welcome the candidates to the stage. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump.
Kamala Harris. Let's have a good debate.
Nice to see you. Have fun.
Thank you.
Welcome to you both. It's wonderful to have you. It's an honor to have you both here tonight.
Good evening. We are looking forward to a spirited and thoughtful debate.
So let's get started. I want to begin tonight with the issue that voters repeatedly say is their #1 issue, and that is the economy and the cost of living in this country. Vice President Harris, you and President Trump were elected 4 years ago, and your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So
It's a good question.
I was raised as a middle-class kid, and I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America. I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy.
Not
Because
answering
here's
the question.
thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing. And the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My passion, one of them, is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to start up small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit.
Answer the question.
My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump's sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year because of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
She's cooked, bro.
President Trump.
She's on the script.
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because it was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had
That's a good answer.
terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they're coming in and they're taking jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans and Hispanics, and also unions. Unions are going to be affected very soon. And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield, Ohio. You look at Aurora in Colorado. They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people that she and Biden led into our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of criminality, and we have to get them out. We have to get them out fast. I created one of the greatest economies in the history of our country. I'll do it again, and even better.
We are going to get to immigration and border security during this debate, but I would like to let Vice President Harris respond on the
She's
economy.
acting. Everything she's doing right now is acting.
Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances, and name-calling. What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us. And I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad, but it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic. And the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million people died, has there been anything like it. We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns, we got masks, we did things that nobody thought possible. And people give me credit for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce back jobs. These were jobs bounce back, and it bounced back and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
So Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people.
He doesn't have a plan, but he does have a plan.
What I describe as an opportunity economy. And the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse. Mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
It's just a soundbite. They gave her that to say. Look, I I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up. The Vice President brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this, because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have and who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration. We are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country, because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response, and you heard what the president said there, because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is, under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out, when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century, which means focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships with our allies, focusing on investing in American-based technology so that we win the race on AI, on quantum computing, focusing on what we need to do to support America's workforce so that we don't end up having, on the short end of the stick, in terms of workers' rights. But what Donald Trump did, let's talk about this, with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. Thank you, President Xi, exclamation point, when we know that Xi was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
President Trump, I'll let you respond.
First of all, they bought their chips from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of philosophies like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist. Her father's a Marxist professor in economics, and he taught her well. But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you look at these millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, where it's, I believe, 21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals. And that's bad for our economy, too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have, and she has, destroyed our country with policy that's insane, almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
President Trump, thank you. Lindsay?
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President Trump, you've often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade.
She's acting,
last
bro.
year.
She's
said
literally
that you were
acting on
proud to
stage.
be
Like, these
the
facial
most
expressions,
pro-life president
that's
in
not her.
American history.
Like, she's literally
Then
doing
last month,
what she
you
was
said that
coached
your
to do. Anytime
administration
Trump
would be
talks,
great for women
she just
and their
makes these
reproductive
faces.
rights.
Like, it's
In your home
very
state
weird.
Of Florida, you
Like, it's
surprised
super
many,
off-putting as well, too.
With regard to your 6-week abortion ban, because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks. But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, who's doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because that predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born, is okay. And that's not okay with me, hence the vote. But what I did is something for 52 years. They've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do. Exceptions. Very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. Now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President, I want to get your response to President Trump.
Well, as I said, you're going to hear a bunch of lies, and that's not actually a surprising fact. Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime, a violation to their body, does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade. As President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages. I think the American people believe that certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, should not be made by the government.
Thank you, Vice President Harris.
Well, there she goes again. It's a lie. I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states, and the states are voting. And it may take a little time, but for 52 years, this issue has torn our country apart, and they've wanted it back in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible. The states are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Boom.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it came
Well,
to
I
your
won't
desk?
have to because, again, two things. Number one, she said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote.
Boom.
Especially now with the 50-50 and essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So it's just talk. You know what it reminds me of? When they said they're going to get student loans terminated, and it ended up being a total catastrophe. The student loans, and then her, I think probably her boss, if you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach. But look, her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. And he went out, got rejected again by the Supreme Court. So all these students got taunted with this whole thing about this whole idea. And how unfair that would have been. Part of the reason they lost to the millions and millions of people that had to pay off their student loans. They didn't get it for free. But they were saying it's the same way that they talked about that they talk about abortion.
But if I could just get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all fairness, J.D., and I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me, but I really didn't. Look, we don't have to discuss it because she'd never be able to get it, just like she couldn't get student loans. They couldn't get student loans. They didn't even come close to getting student loans. They taunted young people and a lot of other people that had loans. They can never get this approved. So it doesn't matter what she says about going to Congress. So wonderful. Let's go to Congress. Do it. But the fact is that for years they wanted to get it out of Congress and out of the federal government, and we did something that everybody said couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
Yo, he's killing it on
President
this.
Harris, want to give
He's
you your
killing
time
it
to
on
respond,
abortion.
but I do want to ask,
This is
would
probably
you
the
support
best
any
abortion
restrictions
debate
on
I've
a
ever
woman's
seen
right
from
to
Trump.
abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade. And as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans. Couples who pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country? Working people, working women who are working 1 or 2 jobs, who can barely afford childcare as it is, have to travel to another state to get on a plane sitting next to strangers to go and get the health care she needs. Barely can afford to do it, and what you are putting her through is unconscionable. And the people of America have not, the majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body, and that is why in every state where this issue has been on the ballot, in red and blue states both, the people of America have voted for freedom.
Vice President Harris,
Excuse me, I
thank
have
you.
to respond. Another lie. It's another lie. I have been a leader on IVF, which is fertilization. The IVF, I have been a leader. In fact, when they got a very negative decision on IVF from the Alabama courts, I saw the people of Alabama and the legislature 2 days later voted it in. I've been a leader on it. They know that, and everybody else knows it. I have been a leader on fertilization, IVF. And the other thing, they you should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Boom.
Come on.
Boom.
Okay, would you do that?
Boom.
Why don't you ask her that question?
Why don't you answer
That's
the question?
problem.
Would you
because
veto?
under Roe
Boom.
v.
Answer
Wade,
the question, would you veto?
You could do abortions in the 7th month,
Boom.
the 8th month, the 9th
That's
month,
not true.
and probably after birth. Just look at the former governor of Virginia. The governor of Virginia said, we put the baby aside, and then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
President Trump, thank you.
We're going to turn now to immigration and border security. We know it's an issue that's
that might
important to
have been
Republicans,
the best
Democrats, voters
abortion
across the
debate I've
board
ever seen
in
from
this
Trump.
country.
Ever.
Vice President
Ever.
Harris,
In fact,
you were
that was the
tasked by
best abortion
President
debate I've ever
Biden
seen from a
getting to the
Republican
root
versus a
causes
Democrat.
of migration from Central America.
That was amazing.
We know that
That
illegal
was
border
absolutely
crossings reached a
amazing.
record
And this
high
is
in
not-
the Biden administration.
this is
This
not
past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum
good topic
restrictions.
for
We know
Republicans,
the numbers since
but
then
he
have
did it.
dropped
He performed the
significantly.
best that he could.
But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings. And let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill which I supported. And that bill would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to help those folks who are working there right now overtime trying to do their job. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are so many families watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress, and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And understand, this comes at a time where the people of our country actually need a leader who engages in solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer.
Bro,
And what
is
you will
this?
also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion
she's trying
and
to
boredom.
piss him off. She's trying to
And
get
I
him to
will
start
tell you,
talking.
the one thing you will not hear him talk
Trump
about
does not fall for
is
this.
you.
Please don't fall
You
for
will
this.
not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first. And I
Oh my
pledge to
God,
you that
she's
I will.
baiting him.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump,
She's
on that
baiting
point, I
him.
want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so? That would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border.
First, let me respond as to the
Please.
rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there, and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase, make America great again. She's destroying this country, and if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, we'll end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is
the people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from television.
But the people are on television saying their
manager.
dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice President Harris,
out.
I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
You talk about extreme.
This woman is so fake,
I think one
bro.
of the reasons why in this election I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formally worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney. And if you want to really know the inside track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already, just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of staff, a 4-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the Republic, would never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond here.
Thank you, because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people. Not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people whose were just killed, viciously and violently killed. And I got to know the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper. He was no good. I fired him. So he writes a book. Another one writes a book. Because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they. But they have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far. In fact, I got more votes than any president, sitting president, in history by far.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier, so let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S. military.
Police, yes.
You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah, it is much higher. Because of them. They allowed criminals, many, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers, to come into our country. And they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes. But it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in. And all over the world, crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof. Despite their fraudulent statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime, and it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But Vice
Excuse me,
President
the
Harris,
FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud, just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
President Trump, thank you. I'll let you respond, Vice President Harris.
Well, I think this is so rich, coming from someone who has been prosecuted for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault,
Yo,
and
this
his
woman, I
next
can't stand
big
this woman, bro.
court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentencing.
Yo.
And let's be clear where each person stands on the issue of what is important about respect for the rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn the page on this same old tired rhetoric and address the needs of the American people, address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan for, address what we must do to support our small businesses, address bringing down the price of groceries. But frankly, the American people are exhausted with this same old tired playbook.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
Excuse me. Every one of those cases was started by them against their political opponent. And I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the DA in New York. Every one of those cases. And then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election. They're fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. Understand, this is someone who has openly said he would terminate, I'm quoting, terminate the Constitution of the United States, that he would weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies. Someone who has openly expressed disdain for members of our military. Understand what it would mean if Donald Trump were back in the White House with no guardrails, because certainly we know now the court won't stop him. We know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people
Vice President
to stop
Harris,
him.
thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president.
This is the one that weaponized, not me. She weaponized. I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy with a fake Russia investigation that went nowhere.
We have a lot to get to.
Nobody voted for her.
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president, you said you wanted to ban fracking. Now you don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss every one of at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking, because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States. And in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is that we have got to invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised by a hardworking mother who worked and saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager. The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my work to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase 3 million homes, increase by 3 million homes by the end of my first term. My work that is related to having a friend when I was in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And my focus then on protecting women and children from violent crime is based on a value that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable. My work that is about protecting Social Security and Medicare is based on long-standing work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down and name-calling. The true measure of the leader is the leader who actually understands the strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
President Trump, your
Well,
response?
first of all, I wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great father, and I learned a lot from him. But I was given a fraction of that, a tiny fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars, many, many billions. And when people see it, they are even surprised. So we don't have to talk about that. Fracking, she's been against it for 12 years. Defund the police, she's been against that forever. She gave all that stuff up very wrongly, very horribly, and everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out, wait a minute, I'm talking now, if you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar? She went out in Minnesota and wanted to let criminals that burned down Minneapolis. She went out and raised money to get them out of jail. She did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. Boom. This is a radical left liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish, one thing so important in my opinion. So I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before. When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher, because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice, because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead, fossil fuel will be dead, we'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out of it. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar, but they take 400, 500 acres of desert
President
soil.
Trump, we have a
These
lot
are
of
not good
issues
things
that
for
we
the
have to get to.
environment that she
We're out of time.
understands.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you. We have an election in just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them. The country and the world saw what played out at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar, remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, oh, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet. That's because she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? When are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America? They're coming in from all over the world, David, all over the world. And crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
But let me just ask you,
David, when are those people going to be prosecuted? When are the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted? Or in Seattle? They went into Seattle. They took over a big percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted?
But let me just ask
you. You might ask her that question.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes or no?
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, you know, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago, her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened. They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi, but I do want Vice President Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the President of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died. And understand, the former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side. Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, the president said, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was, I say, we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking. Let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back. Let's chart a course for the future and not go backwards to the past.
Let me just follow up here.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say, debunked. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Jesse, all of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this. You talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border. How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do, and I would be very proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate, because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her sign a bill to close up the border, because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The President of the United States, you'll get him out of bed, you'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you'll say, come on down to the office, let's sign a bill. If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President,
people are killing many people, unlike J6.
We talked immigration here tonight. I do want to focus on this next issue to both of you, because it really brings us this into focus, truth in these times that we're living in. Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say
sarcastically.
that.
You know that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it. And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten. I was told if I got 63, which was what I got in 2016, you can't be beaten. The election, people should never be thinking about an election as fraudulent. We need two things. We need walls, and we have to have it. We have to have borders, and we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them Republican.
No judge looked at it.
And said
they
there was
said
no
we didn't have
widespread
standing.
fraud.
That's the other thing. They said we didn't have standing, a technicality. Can you imagine a system where a person in an election doesn't have standing?
Bruh.
The President of the United States doesn't have standing.
The
That's how we lost.
moderators are debating
If you
Trump.
look at the facts, and I'd love to have you'll do a special on it.
They're doing Kamala's
I'll show
job.
you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you. We have so many facts and statistics, but you know what? That doesn't matter, because we have to solve the problem that we have right now. That's old news. And the problem that we have right now is we have a nation in decline, and they have put it into decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by a whisker. So he still believes he did not lose the election that was won by President Biden and yourself. But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace. And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did, in fact, lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart, Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago, it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one, but he ended the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline in our country, he ended that. But he let the Russians build a pipeline going all over Europe and heading into Germany, the biggest pipeline in the world. Look, Viktor Orban said it.
Yo,
he said
these
the
faces
most
from Kamala,
respected,
honestly,
most feared person
they're
is
really
Donald
pissing me
Trump.
off. Like, it's
we
just,
had no problems
very
when
off-putting.
Trump was president. But when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy. He got 14 million votes, and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But he got 14 million votes. They threw him out. She got 0 votes. And when she ran, she was the first one to leave because she failed. And now she's running. I don't understand it, but I'm okay with it because
your time is
I think
up.
we're going to do very well.
We've got a lot more to get to.
Turning now to the Israel-Hamas war and the hostages who are still being held, Americans among them. Vice President Harris, in December, you said, quote, Israel has a right to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis. Many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution. And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed millions of people when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel. If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that one. She hates Israel. At the same time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone. It would have never happened. Iran was broke under Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah or any of the 28 different spheres of terror. And they are spheres of terror, horrible terror. They had no money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were broke. Now they're a rich nation, and now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. This would have never happened. I will get that settled and fast, and I'll get the war with Ukraine and Russia ended. If I'm president-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming president.
Vice President Harris, he says you hate Israel.
That's absolutely not true. I have my entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people. He knows that. He's trying to, again, divide and distract from the reality, which is it is very well known that Donald Trump is weak and wrong on national security and foreign policy. It is well known that he admires dictators.
This should be an
wants
easy
to be a
layup, Trump.
dictator on day one, according to
Easy
himself.
layup. No wars on us.
It is well
Easy
known
layup.
that he said of
Come on
Putin
now.
that he can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is well known that he said when Russia went into Ukraine, it was brilliant. It is well known he exchanged
This is an
love
easy layup
letters
for
with
Trump.
Kim
He got
Jong-un. And it is absolutely
strike back on
well
this.
known
This is too easy.
that these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so clear they can manipulate you with flattery and favors. And that is why so many military leaders who you have worked with have told me you are a disgrace. That is why we understand that we have to have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on
Vice
national
President
security,
Harris.
including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President Harris,
Come on,
thank
Trump.
you.
Easy.
And she's the one that caused it. That's weak on national security by allowing every nation last month for the year, 168 different countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way down. Putin endorsed her last week, said, I hope she wins. And I think he meant it because what he's gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world going to Germany and all over Europe?
Yo, her facial
because they're
expressions
weak
to every single
ineffective.
answer.
And Biden, by the way,
President
gets paid
Trump,
a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic
Wow.
ABC News presidential debate from the National Constitution Center right here in Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
Wow. Okay, so we got a lot to recap. Now, in regards to how the debate is going overall, personally, I think that for Kamala Harris, she's not laying an egg, but she's not having a spectacular performance. Okay, she's very scripted, and her facial expressions are really turning me off. Right now, I try to think about it from the perspective of the average person, in the sense that how could the average person interpret what's happening? What happened to Joe Biden at the debate, I think, that really hurt him more than anything was the visual, more so than what he was saying. I mean, everybody knows that he's old and that he's decrepit and that he's mentally deteriorating, right? Everybody knows that. With Kamala Harris, on the other hand, I think that she's going to face the same problem that Biden faced, in the sense that, optically speaking, those fake facial expressions are a real turnoff. Like, it is so obvious that she practiced and acted out those facial expressions as a part of her debate prep, because she makes the exact same facial expressions no matter what Trump is saying throughout the whole debate. It is very creepy. Like, it's really creepy. Okay, like, honestly, I'm sitting here and it makes it hard for me to focus because she's creeping me out, right? With the facial expressions. It doesn't matter what Trump says, right? She just shakes her head. Like, for example, Trump accidentally said that she doesn't support defund the police until he corrected himself in a few sentences later, right? He accidentally said that. She was just shaking her head because by default, that's what she was coached to do. She's not actually listening to anything that Trump is saying. She's just shaking her head and then responding with talking points. Now, the problem here for Trump is that Trump is not hitting her on easy comebacks that he should be levying against Kamala Harris, okay? And part of the reason why is because he is falling for some of her bait, right? For example, when she started talking about crowd sizes when talking about immigration, I think that's what it was about, right? The topic was not about crowd sizes, but that's what she started talking about because she knew that Trump would take up some of his time. Instead of attacking her on her disastrous record, he would start talking about crowd sizes. And that's exactly what he did, okay? So that's a problem, okay? And I'm just being honest with you guys. I'm telling you, like, my honest opinion about how it's going. I think Trump is missing opportunities, right? I think that on some things, like, for example, abortion, he killed it on abortion, right? He absolutely destroyed Kamala on abortion. Like, he honestly did as good as a Republican could hope to do on that issue, considering how Republicans, that's just not a strong issue for Republicans, right? He didn't take the bait and say that he would sign an abortion ban, but then he also asked Kamala Harris about whether or not she supports abortions in the 8th and 9th month, which they do, right? And they're never asked about that, right? They're never asked, okay, what limits do you believe in? Now, I wish that Trump, I really wish that he would focus on making her answer tough questions. Like, for example, the first question of the debate was about, well, Kamala, do you feel as if the economy is good right now, right? Do you feel like the economy is great? This is what you've been telling people, right? Do you feel like you've done a good job? She didn't answer the question. But Trump didn't really hold her accountable for answering the question, right? And that's the problem. Trump has to turn things around and make her answer tough questions. She's not answering tough questions. That's the problem, okay? So that's something that has to be fixed. But I really think that, honestly, a lot of that is neutralized by the fact that Kamala Harris, she just looks weird, right? She's not saying anything spectacular. She's obviously coached. She's very scripted. And optically speaking, like, it is really, really, really weird and creepy, okay, to see the way that she's clearly acting when it comes to everything that Trump says, right? So that's a big problem, okay? I really do think that optically speaking is just not going to be a good look, and I think it's turning people off. It makes people, I think it just makes it hard to really, I guess, like, believe what she's saying, right? She seems so fake and phony with everything that she's saying. Right. Also, on top of that, the debate has now become 3v1. Kamala Harris repeated the false claim about the Charlottesville both sides thing. ABC decided not to fact check her. Why is ABC not fact checking Kamala Harris when they're literally fact checking Trump on sarcasm? Right. I mean, this dude that is hosting the ABC debate, the moderator, he literally tried to fact check Trump on whether or not he was sarcastic about whether or not he believes he won the election. They're fact checking Trump on sarcasm, but yet they let Kamala Harris lie, and they don't fact check her. So now all of a sudden you have a debate where they are basically all debating Trump, and the moderators are doing the job that Kamala Harris should be doing. That's what's happening right now. So anyways.
You have said you would solve this war in 24 hours. You said so just before the break tonight. How exactly would you do that? And I want to ask you a very simple question tonight. Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives that are being uselessly, people being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers. Look, we're in for 250 billion or more because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are. They're in for $150 billion less because Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars.
Like, why is she making this face right now?
Either you pay up or we're not going to protect you
anymore.
She's just
shaking her head
maybe one of the reasons they don't
just
like me as much as they like weak people. But you take a look at what's happening. We're in for 250 to 275 billion. They're into 100 to 150. They should be forced to equalize. With that being said, I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president, okay? They respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin, hasn't spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell. But after I left, when I saw him building up soldiers, he did it after I left, I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't even know if he's... Where is our president? We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify
they
here...
They threw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even know. Is he our president? But we have a president,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's alive.
Your time is up. Just to clarify in the question, do you believe it's in the U.S. best interest for Ukraine to win this war, yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
All right.
Negotiate a deal, because we have to stop all of these human lives from being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on support for Ukraine in this moment, but also, as Commander-in-Chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me. I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here. I actually met with Zelensky a few days before Russia invaded, tried through force to change territorial boundaries, to defy one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity.
You allowed it to happen.
And I met with President Zelensky. I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself. Days later, I went to NATO's eastern flank, to Poland and Romania. And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense. And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now. And understand what that would mean, because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president, and that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO, and what we have done to preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch.
Vice President Harris, thank you. We've heard from both of you on Ukraine tonight. Afghanistan came up in the last hour. I wanted her to respond to something you said earlier, and please, I'll give you a minute here.
Putin would be sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow. Quiet, please. He would have been sitting in Moscow, much happier than he is right now. But eventually, you know, he's got a thing that other people don't have. He's got nuclear weapons. They don't ever talk about that. He's got nuclear weapons. Nobody ever thinks about that. And eventually, maybe he'll use them, and maybe he hasn't been that threatening, but he does have that. Something we don't even like to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about it. But just so you understand, they sent her to negotiate peace before this war started. Boom. 3 days later, he went in and he started the war. Boom. Because everything they said was weak and stupid. They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She was the emissary. They sent her in to negotiate with Zelensky and Putin, and she did. And the war started 3 days later. And that's the kind of talent we have with her.
I love
She's
that.
worse than
Boom.
Biden. In my opinion,
Boom.
I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. But let me tell you something. She is a horrible negotiator. They sent her in to negotiate. As soon as they left, Putin did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring up something. You said
I
she went to
love that.
negotiate with Vladimir
That's
Putin.
what I'm
Vice
talking
President
about.
Harris, have you ever
Use
met
her
Vladimir
words
Putin?
against
Can
her.
you
She
clarify
just said
tonight?
she was there before he
Yet again, I said it at
invaded.
the
Why
beginning
did she
of the
stop
debate, You're going to
it?
hear a bunch of lies coming from this fellow. And that is another one. When I went to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5 times. The reality is it has been about standing as America always should, as a leader upholding international rules and norms, as a leader who shows strength, understanding that the alliances we have around the world are dependent on our ability to look out for our friends and not favor our enemies because you adore strongmen instead of caring about democracy. And that is very much what is at stake here. The President of the United States is commander-in-chief. And the American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of this debate. I want to move on to Afghanistan.
Stoltenberg said Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever seen. He got these countries, the 28 countries at the time, to pay up. He said, I've never seen. He's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen. For years, we were paying almost all of NATO. We were being ripped off by European nations, both on trade and on NATO. I got them to pay up by saying one of the statements you made before, if you don't pay, we're not going to protect you.
President
Otherwise,
Trump.
we would have never gotten it. He said it was one of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen done.
Thank you. I want to turn to Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of the debate, and we witnessed a poignant moment today on Capitol Hill, honoring the soldiers who died in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. I do want to ask the Vice President, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war. And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century. But let's understand how we got to where we are. Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down. He bypassed the Afghan government. He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban. The negotiation involved the Taliban getting 5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this, and the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place of storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we honor the importance of American diplomacy, where we invite and receive respected world leaders. And this former president, as president, invited them to Camp David because he does not, again, appreciate the role and responsibility of the President of the United States to be commander-in-chief with a level of respect. And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response to her saying that you began the negotiations with the Taliban.
So if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, you know, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems. And he said, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo.
Yo.
It was a very good agreement. The reason it was good, it was we were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish, they blew it. The agreement said you have to do this, and they didn't do it. They didn't do it. The agreement was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move on.
And these people did the worst withdrawal, and in my opinion, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump, thank you. I want to move on now to
She's
race
so
and
weird,
politics
man.
in this country.
She's
Mr.
such a
President, you
weirdo,
recently
man.
said of Vice
This woman
President
cannot
Harris,
be
quote,
president. I
I
don't
didn't
care
know
what
she was
anybody
black
says.
until a number of years ago
No way.
when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known
Oh my
as
God,
black.
now they bringing this up.
I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. You make a big deal out of something. I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words, so I'm
I
asking.
don't know. I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
I think it's, I mean, honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently,
Why they ask
over
this
the
question,
course of
bro?
his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people. You know, I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by
She can't
race.
even
And let's
defend it, bro.
remember
She can't even defend
how
it.
Donald Trump started. He was land, he owned land, he owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent property to black families.
Here we go.
Let's remember, this is the same individual
Crime racism.
who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5. Took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first black president of the United States. And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this, want someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country. We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people? Knowing that regardless of people's color or the language their grandmother speaks, we all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your 3rd time.
This is the most divisive presidency in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country, and they come up with things like what she just said. Going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park 5, they admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest economies in the history of the world, and I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying our economy. They have no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman, she says. She is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had, a horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad, and she can't get away with that.
Thank you. Your time is up, Lindsay.
I want to respond to that, though. I want to just respond briefly. Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country. One who believes in what is possible, one who brings a sense of optimism about what we can do instead of always disparaging the American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans and let's compare the plans. I have a plan to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction, to pursue their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas, their hard work. I have a plan, $6,000 for young families for the first year of your child's life, to help you in that most critical stage of your child's development. I have a plan that is about allowing people to be able to pursue what has been fleeting in terms of the American dream by offering a help with down payment of $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. That's the kind of conversation, I believe, David, that people really want tonight, as opposed to a conversation that is constantly about belittling and name-calling. Let's turn the page
Vice President
and move
Harris,
forward.
thank you. Let's turn to policy.
President
Let's
Trump,
turn back
we
to
have
policy.
to move on. President Trump.
Let's turn to policy,
She
please.
has a plan to defund the police. She has a plan to confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
she
we
has
do
a
have to
plan
move
to
on to
not
other
allow
issues.
fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Okay. Thank you,
That's
Mr.
what her
President.
plan is until just recently.
I just need
Lindsay,
to
go ahead.
respond
No,
because
Trump,
the
President
former
Trump.
president has
No,
said
I'm
something
sorry.
twice that I need to
No,
respond to.
I'm sorry. We're
I
going to move on, Vice President
one time
Harris.
to what he has
President
said
Trump, this is
multiple
now
times.
your
Yes.
third time running for president. You have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better. Last month, you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan, and can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today. And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things, we're going to do it and we're going to replace it. But remember this, I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came up. They wouldn't vote for it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, never going to be great, or do I let it rot? And I felt I had an obligation, even though politically it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in that administration. We read about the bad ones. We had some real bad ones, too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing. But it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan?
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president right now. But if we come up with something, I would only change it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive. And there are concepts and options we have to do that. And you'll be hearing about it in the not-too-distant future.
Vice President Harris, in 2017, you supported Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run healthcare system. 2 years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private health care options. But what we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So
Kamala's
stop
a
with the
gun owner?
continuous
Stop.
lying about this stuff.
Stop, bruh.
As it relates to the Affordable
Stop.
Care Act, understand, just look at the history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. I was a senator at the time. When
my
I will
goodness,
never forget
wow.
the early morning hours when it was up for a
Just
vote in the
lying.
United States Senate. And the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged as being, you don't like him, you said, at the time because he got caught. He was an American hero. The late, great John McCain, I will never forget that night, walked onto the Senate floor and said, no, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan. And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. I don't have to tell the people watching tonight, you remember what that was like? Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes? And thankfully, as I've been vice president, and we, over the last 4 years, have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed, for the first time, Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it.
Vice
Past his
President
prologue
Harris, thank
in terms
you.
of where Donald Trump stands on that.
I want to move to an issue that's important for a lot
She made a mistake. Number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going. And you know what? We can do much better than Obamacare, much less money. But she won't improve private insurance for people, private medical insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to get. People are paying privately for insurance that have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation that you need immediately.
President Trump, thank you. We have another issue that we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans, in particular younger voters, and that's climate change. President Trump, with regard to the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat. The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said that climate change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or it's being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as vice president over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been vice president. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories around the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs. And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also know that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles. It includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
That didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. It's going, they're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have given to China is unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did she pay him $3.5 million? This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with closing statements from both of our candidates. An historic night, this ABC News presidential debate from Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
All right, so I think that the second half is going a little bit better for Trump than it did in the first half, in the sense that he definitely did a lot better on foreign policy, in the sense that when Kamala Harris tried to say that Trump was weak and basically tried to say that Trump would get taken advantage of, right, when it comes to wars and foreign policy. And it's like, no. Your administration has been an absolute disaster when it comes to foreign policy. And I'm glad that Trump brought that up when discussing the war in Ukraine, right? So ironically, up until now, I think that the best topics for Trump thus far, kind of crazy, abortion. I think he absolutely killed it on abortion. And I think foreign policy, I think he also won that as well, too. Again, on the other stuff, to me, it's just, you know, I just feel like he's leaving a lot on the table in regards to opportunities to attack Kamala Harris, okay? I mean, I would have loved to have seen Kamala Harris answer more questions about some of the votes that she cast in regards to the Inflation Reduction Act, things of that nature that have contributed to inflation. I would love to see Kamala Harris answer questions about her unrealized capital gains tax, which is something that Trump should have brought up. Like, yeah, you got a plan, but your plan is Looney Tunes, right? You have an ultra progressive plan. You want to tax unrealized capital gains, and you want to tax tips, right? Which is what you did in the Inflation and Reduction Act until you decided to steal my idea. Things like that, I feel like Trump is missing an opportunity. Also, when it comes to immigration as well, too, he had to bring up the fact that the Biden administration got rid of all his executive orders, right? He should have said, okay, well, if you guys are so tough, if you're going to close the border, then you can do it right now with the executive orders, which is what he said, right? He basically said that, but he has to talk about how they specifically repealed his executive orders the first day they got into office, right? So it's stuff like that that I wish Trump would have really hit Kamala on harder. And I think that is my main issue with the debate thus far. But Kamala is coming off so fake and so phony that I really think that to the average person, honestly, I think it's a wash, right? I don't think it really moves the needle, right? Trump's not losing any support at this point, okay? Trump is not losing any support, okay? That's not going to happen. Kamala has a lot to lose. And I don't think she really gained that much in this debate, to be honest with you, because I don't think she's done that well. I think that she left herself open, okay, to a lot of easy comebacks, a lot of easy, like, I really wish when Kamala was talking about democracy, I really wish Trump would have said, well, how can you guys talk about democracy when there's not democracy in your own party? Nobody voted for you, right? You want to talk about democracy, but nobody voted for you. Trump should have, he could have hit her with one-liners like that, and it would have been devastating, right? Kamala left herself wide open throughout this whole debate. And, you know, I just think that there were a lot of opportunities that were missed. But overall, it's hard for me to really say that Kamala moved the needle, because I think that she was pretty bad, right, in regards to articulating exactly what she wants to do, okay, in her policies. And she hasn't really explained some of the flip-flops that have happened. And I really don't think that Trump has pressed her hard enough on the flip-flops. But you know, it also doesn't help that the moderators are basically going against Trump as well, too. I mean, it's a 3v1 debate at this point. And you know, to me, I think they have to have another debate, right? There has to be another debate because this is just not going to cut it, right? I think that this debate right here is not going to have much of an impact, to be quite honest with you guys. I don't think it's going to move the needle at all, which honestly I think is overall an L for Kamala Harris, like I told you guys going into the debate, right? Unless she had a spectacular performance, it was going to be an L, okay? And I don't think she's had a spectacular performance. I don't think Trump has had a spectacular performance either, but I think that he's done enough to basically make it a wash, right? And, you know, if it's a wash, then I think that that's ultimately an L for Kamala because you already see the momentum in Trump's favor, right? Trump hasn't said anything tonight that he hasn't said at past debates. Kamala hasn't said anything about Trump that nobody has heard before in regards to criticisms. Everybody has heard the criticisms of Trump, right? So the things that she's saying, it doesn't really, it's not really going to hit home for a couple reasons. One, we've already heard it, right? It's just recycled talking points from the liberal media, right? It sounds like she watched ABC and then did this debate, right? She watched MSNBC then did this debate. But Kamala, her points, I don't think they're really landing because she's so fake. It's so phony and it's so obvious, right? It's like there's nothing authentic about what she's saying. So it's almost kind of like, well, is she really helping herself? I don't think so. I don't. I think she's just too fake, to be honest with you. And it's too obvious.
An attempt to take us backward. But we're not going back. And I do believe that the American people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us. And we can chart a new way forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan, understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together that is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was a DA, I was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them, are you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump?
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it, and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like we're not going to frack. We're not going to take fossil fuel. We're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that, and within 1 year, they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question. Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world, they're laughing. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President Trump, thank you. And that is our ABC News presidential debate from here in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center. I'm Lindsay Davis.
And I'm David Muir. Thank you for watching here in the U.S. and all over the world, and from all of us here at ABC News. Good night.
And we are here live on ABC with our post-debate comments. I'm Martha Raddatz. It was a lively debate, from the economy to abortion to Afghanistan. They had it all, and it was historic, John Carl, fiery.
Wow. 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 That was quite a debate. And I'm Jonathan Carl here with, of course, Mary Bruce and Rachel Scott. Our reporters across the news division have been updating our live blog, looking at some of the...
So here's the thing. I'll tell you guys what I think, and I may decide to listen in and see what the mainstream liberal media thinks, and then kind of go with there. So this is what I think. Overall, I think it was a wash. This is just my immediate reaction. I haven't slept on it. This is just me thinking about what just happened, taking it in, digesting it. And my immediate reaction is that it was a wash. Okay, I don't think that this debate moved the needle in a positive direction for either candidate, right? I don't think that Kamala Harris won. Okay, I think honestly, overall, it being a wash is honestly an L for Kamala, because ultimately she has more to lose, and she should have had a better performance, right? She had to have a spectacular performance, considering how this is her first exposure to a broader audience, right? Outside of the people that, you know, watch mainstream liberal media all the time and that watch her rallies or whatever, which, you know, is probably not that many people, but still, right? This is her exposure to the world, and she didn't lay an egg, okay? She didn't lay an egg, but she also wasn't spectacular. So ultimately, I think it was an L, okay? And part of the reason why I think it was an L for her, even though the debate was a wash, is because of her facial expressions. Like, I really cannot get over just how scripted this woman was. Like, I'm actually very uncomfortable knowing how fake and phony Kamala Harris is, right? It doesn't matter what she said. The fakeness and the phoniness just made me feel like I can't believe a thing that comes out of this woman's mouth, right? I can't even believe the expressions on her face. I can't even believe her body language, because all of it is manufactured and forced, right? She literally responded to everything Trump said, whether it was right or wrong, okay, with the same facial expressions the whole night. It was very weird, right? It was extremely weird. And I really believe that turned a lot of people off, okay? I really believe that cost her a lot, okay? That fake acting throughout the whole debate, yeah, I think that was a problem, a big problem, okay? I don't think that she articulated herself well in regards to what she wants to do, okay, her actual plans. I don't think that she was very convincing in regards to the things that she promises she's going to do, like she's going to secure the border, okay? She says that she doesn't believe in abolishing private insurance. She claims that she's tough on the world stage. None of these things are really believable, considering how, again, she's so fake and phony, right? Especially on the economy. She has no clue on the economy whatsoever. This is why she wouldn't even answer the first question. In fact, she didn't answer any questions throughout the whole debate. The whole debate, she was avoiding answering any question. I don't think she answered one question directly, to be quite honest with you. I really don't. I really don't. So I think a couple things. Kamala didn't answer any questions. Her clear fake and phony attitude, I think, really hurt her, because the answers that she did give, I don't think were convincing. So honestly, again, I think that's ultimately why it was a wash. And because it was a wash, I think ultimately it's an L for her. Okay? Because again, with Trump, everybody's already seen this from Trump, right? There's nothing that Trump said. There's nothing that was said about Trump that's any different than what we've already heard. Okay? My biggest problem with Trump is the fact that he didn't take advantage of the clear and obvious openings that were available all night to really hammer Kamala Harris. He did not put her on defense enough. Kamala Harris should have been answering questions about her flip-flopping on her border policies. Like, why is it that not one time throughout this debate it was brought up that Kamala Harris wanted to decriminalize illegal immigration? Not only did she want to decriminalize illegal immigration, she wanted to give illegals free health care. Okay, Trump did bring up her giving illegals free sex change operations, which was good. Okay, clearly he paid attention to that YouTube, that CNN report that came out just yesterday about that. But he really had an opportunity to make her answer questions about, okay, if you believe this stuff about being tough on the border, why did you say this in 2019? What happened? Why did you change your mind? Okay, Kamala Harris did not talk enough tonight, right? Trump talked too much. Kamala Harris didn't talk enough, right? And that was a big problem, okay? Big problem. So ultimately, I think it was a wash. I think that there should be a second debate. And I'm hoping that if there is a second debate, which at this point, I think that Kamala Harris may choose not to do it, right? I don't think that she wants to do another debate. But there has to be a second debate, I think, because this just wasn't good enough, right? It wasn't good enough. And we also need another network that's not so biased, right? I really wish that they would do a debate on Fox News. Who knows at this point? I'll be fine with a CNN debate because CNN, at least in the Biden debate, they weren't so biased, right? They weren't doing what ABC did, right? What ABC did tonight was a disgrace to journalism. That's also another reason why I think that this was an L for Kamala, because they were making it obvious that they were in her corner. They didn't fact check her on anything. She was allowed to lie with impunity, right? This is why I can't even be that upset with Trump's performance, because it was a 3v1 debate, right? So not only did he have Kamala Harris trying to throw him off, but he also had the moderators fact checking him and throwing him off as well too, doing things that they would not do to Kamala Harris, that they did not do to Kamala Harris the whole night. So again, I can't even be that disappointed because I'm like, okay, well, he was debating three people. We knew it going into the debate that this was going to be rigged, and they showed us that, yeah, we're going to rig it against Trump. Now, one thing I do like about what Trump did to Kamala is that he did turn her strategy back on her, right? Because she wanted to catch Trump interrupting her, which is something he didn't do, right? He just let her talk the whole time. He did not try to interrupt her at all. But she was trying to interrupt him because she was doing her little fake acting. Again, she's so stupid. She's so dumb. She's so stupid that she doesn't even realize that her fake acting, her disagreeing with everything that he says, right? Regardless of what he says, right? Just shaking her head, saying no, saying, oh, that's not true, right? Saying that into the mic. All this stuff is rehearsed nonsense from her team. She's so stupid that she doesn't realize that Trump was using that against her, because Trump picked up on the fact that she's saying things into the mic and he can hear it on the debate stage, but the mic is muted, so the audience can't hear it, right? But he can hear it on the debate stage, and him hushing her up, right, a few times throughout the night, I think was actually a pretty good moment for Trump, right? Actually, great moments for Trump. So I really like the fact that he did that, right? That was good, okay? Because it really showed that she was the one that was kind of unhinged throughout the night in regards to her facial expressions and her reactions to the things that he was saying, because the whole strategy was for her to make those facial expressions to try to make it seem like everything that he was saying was ridiculous, right, and false, right? Everything he's saying is so ridiculous that she has to make these exaggerated facial expressions. So anyways, let's check in on what J.D. Vance is saying, and then we'll go from there.
Had a lot to say, but very little actual substance behind it for how she's going to lower grocery prices, secure the border, and make housing more affordable in this country. She's been the vice president for 3.5 years. She can't run on her record, and she apparently can't run on much of her plans either, because it's just a lot of slogans and not a whole lot of substance.
But Senator Vance, why won't he just say that he would veto the national abortion ban? And by the way, had you spoken to him about it before you were put in a position to answer that question?
No, I hadn't spoken to him about it because, again, Donald Trump thinks the question is absurd because he doesn't support a national abortion ban, and he's been explicit about it. And, John, I think that it's so preposterous for the media to focus so much on an issue where Donald Trump has been crystal clear and not on the fact that people can't afford groceries and housing because of Kamala Harris's policies. This election is actually quite simple, and Kamala Harris and apparently the media would like to distract Americans on issues, by the way, that Donald Trump's been crystal clear about, but they're not talking nearly enough. This debate didn't talk nearly enough about the fact that Americans are struggling because they can't afford groceries, they can't afford housing, and a lot of their kids are dying of fentanyl overdoses because Kamala Harris has let the Mexican drug cartels take over the southern border. This is a disgrace,
Senator,
what's going on in our country, John, and we could do so much better if we just had better leadership. We've got the best workers, the most beautiful country, the best natural resources, but Kamala Harris's leadership is squandering the great benefits of this country. It's why we've got to get back to Donald Trump's leadership.
Senator, by the way, I asked because he hadn't been crystal clear and he said something different than what you said. That's why I was seeking clarification. But let me ask you about this just very quickly. I heard Donald Trump before this debate describe Kamala Harris as, I'll just read a few of them, a low IQ individual.
Okay, this is nonsense from the media here. See, I don't want to feel like listening to J.D. Vance. I don't want to feel like listening to him. Like, if he was on that debate stage versus Kamala, I feel like I would walk away from that debate saying, wow, J.D. Vance absolutely destroyed Kamala, right? That's how I feel right now, okay? Like, I feel like if you would have put Tulsi on stage, J.D. Vance, Vivek, right? I really feel like I would feel a lot different about how that debate went, and I really don't like that feeling. I really don't, okay? So, you know, it's just one of those things where I'm listening to J.D. Vance, I'm like, if only Trump had articulated the rebuttals and the answers the way that J.D. Vance is doing right now, we'd be having a much different conversation. But, you know, then again, you know, it was a 3v1 debate, right? Who knows? Maybe Trump didn't want to hit her too hard because the media is going to boohoo, whine, and cry sexism and bigotry, racism. I don't know, right? I'm just saying that listening to J.D. Vance go over it is almost like, okay, well, again, I wish all these things were said during the debate. So let's check in on some other liberal media outlets and see what what people are saying. Let's see. Let me go to Fox News first, actually. Oh man.
The points a little bit on the betting markets. But in the end, we all know what we knew before, that ABC's goal tonight was to help Kamala Harris.
Yeah, that is
and
what
ABC did help Kamala Harris. Now, did Donald Trump miss a few opportunities? Absolutely. Did she miss a few opportunities? Yes, she did, especially when he said, you're right, I fired those people because I fire people who are incompetent. I thought that was one of the strongest moments of the debate. There's very little accountability in all of government. And this has happened across administrations. So I think in the end, if the steel workers in Pennsylvania want to keep their jobs, if the auto workers in Michigan want to keep their jobs, they see this debate and they see one person standing up for them, and it's still Donald Trump.
But Britt, you know, you look at the CNN interview with Dana Bash that she does alongside her nominee, Tim Walz. This is a different person who was well prepped,
absolutely
well prepared, had answers, and knew where she was going.
Not only a different person from the person she was in that interview on CNN, but a different person from the absolute dunderhead so many of us thought she was during her conduct as vice president, when she would come out with these ludicrous statements that started nowhere and ended in midair.
Unburdened by the past.
Unburdened by common sense. And here she was tonight. She was composed. She was prepared. She kept her cool. She saw advantages. She took them. She baited him successfully, which is the story of the debate, in my view. So she came out ahead in this, in my opinion. No doubt. Now, whether it'll move the needle in the race, very few things seem to, but that remains to be seen.
What are you going to say? Does it move the needle, though?
It may or may not. But think about this. Most people didn't know her. They heard the lead up that she was going to be unprepared, that she was a cackler, that she had mismanaged things. You watch this tonight, and you don't know much about this. You say, all right, when am I going to see that person? Because you saw a different person this evening.
Now, this is delusion. This is delusion. You did not see a different person this evening. What you saw from Kamala Harris was a scripted fake actor. That's what you saw from Kamala Harris. You did not see some super competent, super qualified, very successful vice president that is now ready to take the job of president. That's not what you saw, right? Anybody that is talking about Kamala Harris having a strong performance, you didn't watch the debate. Her performance was not strong. She left herself wide open on a lot of things. Again, you had ABC basically, debating in her favor, right? Debating for her against Trump. So I guess, for her, it was, pretty easy to go up there and just say scripted stuff. But it's so obviously scripted that you cannot come away from this debate. You can come away from this debate saying, okay, Trump could have done better, right? I understand that. But to say that Kamala Harris did a spectacular job is just not true. It's not true, right? So I don't agree with that.
Because there was a lot of buildup to this moment.
Yeah.
There was a lot of buildup. The question is, how many people watched for how long? And how much did it move this race? Because it's as tight a race as we have ever seen in this country.
Yeah,
and last time we sat here, Joe Biden was running against President Trump. So who knows what's going to happen next? Thank you all for...
Did something great for every parent in America. She put the bully in his place.
Yeah, I can't add more to what you guys have said using political terms such as butt whipping. But Harris hacked Donald Trump tonight. And we talked earlier, I mentioned, being unconventional, which he has been all these years, doesn't mean he's unpredictable. And it turned out she could use a Mad Libs of triggers of everything he's ever talked about or been bothered by and use them in a formula that was to first talk about an attack line he might have said to her, take a topic she was weak on, and follow it up with a trigger for him, and then watch him spin himself in circles trying to defend it. And at the start of this conversation, at the start of the night, we talked about who's going to look like an incumbent versus who's going to look like a challenger. And I think she made herself look like the challenger to a person and really kind of ran through his record.
Listen, you know him well. Even on the immigration question, she quickly turned it and totally emasculated him and got him discombobulated.
She dismantled him and made it that on the issues he should be the strongest on, border security, the economy. He ended up relitigating his rallies and talking about his crowd sizes. She put the bait out there and he took it. And I'm hearing from Republicans, because I'm trying to think from the perspective of, okay, if you're a Trump viewer at home, what are you thinking? Sitting Republican lawmakers who objectively think she won the debate, but also that the mask is starting to slip with Donald Trump. That this is the man who projects himself as strong, as in command.
All right. I don't think that this analysis is accurate, right? I think that what they're trying to do is that they're trying to play it up as a definitive victory for Kamala Harris, even though they all know that it wasn't, right? This was not a strong performance. Realistically, this is not going to move the needle. But what they're going to do is that they're going to use this as an excuse for there not to be another debate. They're going to say, Trump was so unhinged, it was so bad that there shouldn't be another debate, right? And they're going to hope that that helps Kamala Harris in the polls enough to get her across the finish line. You can already see the move coming from a mile away. So I'm waiting to see what Republicans are going to say. What is the actual Republican response, not the fake Republican response.
The country right now, it has been a huge boon for Democrats. And again, I'm going back to, if you're a Trump voter, I'm getting incoming from some of the Trump voters I've met in my travels, and they're defending him. But the Republican strategists, they're not surprised because they know Donald Trump and they know he takes the bait, but they're really disappointed that he didn't have answers on substantive policy questions, to your point about immigration, that on what should be his issue, he took the bait and was talking about conspiracy theories and other things. And on policy proposals that matter to the people who will settle the election, he had nothing to say.
I think she showed up as herself. She is a prosecutor.
Wow.
She can prosecute the case.
About,
she is not.
She showed up as herself. That's not the takeaway. That she did not show up as herself. Okay, she was so clearly scripted that it was turning me off. I had a hard time watching it. I had a hard time paying attention to Kamala Harris or anything that she was saying because it was so fake. To say that she showed up as herself, this woman should be fired for saying that. If that's the first thing that comes out of your mouth, she should be fired. This is a delusional take, right? This is so delusional. Again, you can say that Trump didn't have his best night, but to say that Kamala Harris showed up as herself and that she had a strong night, that's not accurate either. Not accurate.
Here's a path to the future. And the final thing I'll say is that I'm texting with some folks who are doing Dow testing, focus groups during this debate. undecided voters in Georgia. First, the gender gap is massive. It's about a 20, 30-point gender gap on her responses. But one of Trump's worst answers was his response to COVID. And that was really when he started to unspiral and unravel, and he couldn't get back on track. I mean, say what you want, friends, but she nailed it tonight.
Okay, now from the other side.
Yeah, nice.
The other America. The other America, right? The red America. Yeah. So, John, I agree that she passed the test. Does she look presidential? Did she do a good job up there?
I don't agree with that.
She did pass that test. But she was very light. You know, you're complaining about Trump saying you don't have details on your plan. No details provided on anything here. But for her, she was very good at kind of rattling off her 2-minute answers, but then never really answered the questions.
Nope,
I think Red
never.
America will look at this and say, I mean, I see it in the tweets. I never thought I'd say this, but CNN did such a great job on the debate and being fair.
Facts.
Where ABC was not
Facts.
fair. This was a 3-on-1 at times.
Yeah, it
versus
was.
Trump. They were demanding Trump be very specific on answers. But Kamala Harris, when asked about her values changing and having to articulate the differences of why she was for reparations, not for reparations, she said, they listed a very long list, and she said, I'll get to each of those. And then she didn't get to any of them.
I would be curious to see the time, who had more time, because my sense was that Donald Trump was given more time. I don't know.
No, but I'm just saying,
I don't
Anderson,
know,
but my point is not time. My point is there was not a demand. David Muir didn't say, well, Madam Vice President, are you going to answer that question? Where he did do that with Trump. There was more aggressive follow-up
Yeah, it was.
on the Trump
100%.
questioning than there.
She didn't have to answer any question. That's the thing. She didn't answer one question tonight. She didn't answer one question on anything.
Moderators have their thumb on the scale. Republican voters are going to watch this.
I think it was two very specific questions, like yes or no. Is there anything you regret about January 6th? No answer.
Well, then how about this? How about this? When she was pressed, and I thought this was particularly disgusting for me. When she was pressed on Afghanistan, she didn't say, "Yeah, I regret that 13 young men and women died there." And I regret that I did not, in the 3.5 years as vice president, meet with their families.
She didn't.
I mean, she didn't say that.
Scott.
And nobody followed up on that. And that is disgusting to me.
I agree with David that you're going to hear some carping from Republicans about, this wasn't a debate, it was a trial, and there were 3 prosecutors. I definitely going to hear that. But it is a little hard to complain about the refs when you're not making your own jump shots.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And the first 15 minutes of this debate, he won. The questions were on the economy. He had it right. He had it right on inflation. Even on the tariff question, I think he had it right.
Yeah, he did good on that too.
Inexplicably,
the tariff one, he
on
did a great job on that one.
That's where she derailed him. And from that point forward, she basically dictated the flow. Now, in the closing statements, when he said, you've been there for 3.5 years, why haven't you done it? That really should have permeated. That's his best argument. It really should have permeated everything. She peppered all of her answers with, I have a plan, I have a plan. He should have retorted every time, you've been there 3.5 years.
That seems like the only thing they worked out in advance, that he had sort of in his mind, okay, this is something we're going to say.
But look, she did not put a lot of meat on the bones. I agree she passed the competency test. She did tell some of her own lies, and she left some things out there. But overall, she dictated the flow.
I want to go to Caitlin Collins in the debate spin room with Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. Caitlin?
All right. So
yeah,
what
thanks,
I'm
Anderson.
Not
I'm
do
here, and it is timely.
I am not going to sit here and listen to an actual Democrat talk about this. Yeah, I mean, look, at this point, I personally think that it was a wash. Personally, let's actually listen to a Republican talk about this, and then I think I'm gonna wrap it up.
They start hearing these things. Hold on a second. She helped bail out rioters? Hold on a second. She wouldn't answer the question about at what point should an abortion not be allowed, the day before the due date. She wouldn't answer that question. They pick up on these things. And for her to brag about Afghanistan, she bragged about Afghanistan. Okay, she said Joe Biden got us out. He was run out of there. And not only was he run out of there, we lost $90 billion worth of American equipment that they're parading down the street. There are a lot of real people in the real world who are not political junkies who are going to vote and decide this election, who watched tonight. They saw the man that was president, and they remember their lives were better when he was president. They were safer, they were more prosperous, we were more respected in the world. And then they saw this person, they didn't know a lot about her, and now they're beginning to learn facts about her that I think will be decisive.
Senator, great to see you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, now, according to the Washington Post, the Harris campaign is now saying they want a second debate.
Oh.
What does that tell us?
Okay.
Joining us with more reaction to tonight's debate,
Wow.
Texas Senator Ted Cruz is with us. Senator, how do you interpret that and your overall thoughts on the debate tonight?
Well, listen, I'm skeptical that Kamala's team will have her do a second debate. I think they're going to back out of that. I think they're going to send her back to Joe Biden's basement. I think we probably will not see Kamala emerge again from the basement, sort of like the groundhog in her shadow. She's not going to come out again from the basement until election night, other than to go for rallies and read from teleprompters. And listen, I got to say tonight, what Kamala demonstrated is, number one, she cannot defend her disastrous record. Her record is an absolute train wreck. So instead what she did, what we saw tonight in this, quote, debate, was her repeating memorized set pieces from her stump speech and from her convention speech. The very opening...
I'm not the only one that saw this, right? I'm not the only one.
...off now than you were 4 years ago. She refused to answer that because she couldn't answer that, because nobody, unless you are a Mexican drug lord, nobody else is better off than they were 4 years ago. So she didn't answer that. Instead, she's like, I'm from a middle-class family. I want things better for you. And no aspect on inflation. She didn't address that she cast the tie-breaking vote on trillions of dollars of spending that caused inflation, hurting Americans across this country. On energy, she didn't address that she and Joe Biden have waged war on American energy over and over and over again, driving up the cost of gasoline and everything else for Americans. On the border, she didn't address her own personal responsibility, the invasion, the crime, the murders, the women sexually assaulted, the children brutalized. She didn't take responsibility for any of that. And then on foreign policy, I actually thought on foreign policy she was the weakest. It was absurd.
Yeah, she was the weakest on foreign policy.
When she turned to Donald Trump and says, well, everyone knows you were weak and ineffective. Listen, if Donald Trump were still in the White House, the two wars that broke out under her leadership and Joe Biden's would not have happened. Russia would not have invaded Ukraine, and we would not have the war in Israel. And she took no responsibility for that weakness, nor did she have a word to say about the over $100 billion that she and Joe Biden have flowed to Iran. All of her records she ran away from, and I got to say, the ABC moderators were complicit in her running a completely fact-free debate performance.
I think that's well said, Senator. I mean, and there's so much that we don't understand. Defund, dismantle, reimagine, ICE, the police, the mini-app. They wanted to talk about January 6th. There was 600 riots in the summer of 2020.
Yeah,
she tweets out the Minnesota bail fund 4 days after the police precinct is burned. And, you know, they won't stop. They shouldn't stop. We're not going to stop. All things that she said. 18 to 24-year-olds are stupid. Abolish the filibuster to pass the Green New Deal. Inflation is transitory. The border's secure. We're proud of Bidenomics. The country needs to be woke. We'll never deport illegals. And now we're going to give free sex change operations to convicted felons and illegal immigrants. How's that going to go over in your state of Texas? I would imagine not so well.
Look, it goes over terribly. But what you just did, what I just did, is what the Trump campaign needs to do between now and Election Day, which is lay out the actual facts of her record, because she won't confront them. So for example, on abortion, she said, no, I'm not for late-term abortions, 8 and 9 month abortions. Well, she has voted for legislation that would legalize abortion up until the moment of birth. When she says, I don't know what you're talking about, abortion after birth, well, Kamala Harris voted against the Born Alive Infant Protection Act, which says that if in the course of an abortion a baby is alive, is breathing, is outside the womb, you can't just kill the baby. She voted no. And so her actual record needs to be systematically laid out when it comes to crime. This is someone who has supported defund the police. This is someone who has supported defund ICE. This is someone, Kamala Harris, who compared ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, to the KKK. But we need to make sure those facts get before the American people, because ABC is not going to do it. The corporate media is not going to do it. And listen, her radical record is radical the same way my opponent, Colin Allred, who's running against me, both of them vote repeatedly in favor of open borders. Both of them vote for trillions of dollars of spending we don't have. Both of them vote for the war against oil and gas and American energy. Both of them vote in favor of defunding the police. That's their record. But I got to tell you, the left right now, they are flooding money to Kamala Harris. They're flooding money to my opponent because they want to deceive the American people. Both Kamala Harris and my opponent are running ads with Donald Trump's border wall in it, even though both of them have opposed it their entire careers. The hypocrisy is enormous, which is why we need to bring the facts back up and prosecute this case on the merits.
Yeah. So,
all right, Senator Ted Cruz.
At this point, I think we've all kind of come to a conclusion about this debate, at least initially. I don't know if it'll move the needle. I don't think that it will. I think it's interesting that Kamala Harris and her team are already proposing a second debate. I think that is bait. Now, in regards to whether or not they really want to do it, again, it's funny because I thought that if they thought that the first debate was a victory, they wouldn't do any more debates, right? They'd say, oh, well, we don't need to do any more debates because we basically won the first one. We're done, right? But apparently they want to do a second debate. So I personally think if they want to do a second debate, Trump should say, okay, let's do it on Fox News. And if she does not accept a Fox News debate, because this ABC debate was rigged against Trump. I mean, everybody can see that this was totally rigged, right? It was 3v1. But then again, like Scott Jennings said, yeah, you can complain about the refs, but Trump, he missed some jump shots, some layups, to be quite honest with you. Not just jump shots, layups. But regardless of that, okay, the next debate has to be on Fox News. It has to be on a network that is not going to do that, right? I don't even trust CNN to handle the next debate, even though they did a good job with Biden. They wanted to get Biden out on purpose, right? So, maybe they didn't feel the need to help Biden as much as they helped Kamala tonight, the liberal media. But Trump has to say, okay, second debate, Fox News or bust, right? Fox News or bust. I'm so serious. Because we can't have another debate where it's biased like this, right? Where it's rigged. See, this is why I at first, when Kamala was basically trying to get out of this debate, right, when she didn't want to negotiate new terms, this is why I said that I think that honestly Trump shouldn't even do the debate. I think that he should show up and do the Fox News town hall and then say, listen, I wanted 3 debates. I never agreed to debate Kamala Harris. And honestly, maybe he should have sent J.D. Vance to do the debate. I'm just saying, right? I'm just saying. The second debate has to be on Trump's terms. It has to be. It has to be. Especially if this debate doesn't move the needle in the polls, right? The polls remain the way they are right now. It's probably best for Trump to just, put his foot down and say, no, we're doing the debate on Fox News or there's no debate. Right? I mean, any network outside of ABC or CNN or NBC, there has to be a debate off of one of those platforms, right? You cannot debate on all those platforms every single time. They're rigged, okay? It's too obvious. Who knows? News Nation, Fox News, Newsmax. She never do Newsmax, okay? She's going to boohoo, whine, and cry about Fox News, right? I think maybe he could get her to do Fox. Maybe, right? Maybe not. News Nation. I don't see why she would accept News Nation. I would much rather see it on News Nation than I would on any other outlet. CNN, MSNBC, whatever, right? So I think it's fascinating that she's proposing a second debate. I think that this is bait to try to get Trump to agree to a second debate on a liberal media platform. I'm pretty sure she's going to come out here and say, we want to do a second debate on X, Y, and Z platform. And then all of a sudden in liberal media, they're going to do their jobs and try to make it seem like, that's the official debate offer. And Trump has to accept that offer or else he's running, right? They're not going to allow Trump to negotiate his terms as he should on the second debate. They're not going to allow him to do that. So I think that's why they're putting out this second debate as bait to Trump to say, hey, you need to debate us on our rules right now, okay? You need to do that or else you're scared, right? This is what they're doing, right? They're trying to control the narrative right after the debate because they probably feel good about the performance enough to the point where they say, okay, well, let's have another rigged debate in our favor. And I don't think that Trump should fall for that. I think Trump should come out here and say, yes, I want to do a second debate, but on Fox News. If it's not done on Fox News or News Nation or whatever network that's not the liberal media, right, the mainstream liberal media, then I'm not going to do it. And let the chips fall where they may. To be honest with you, that's what should happen because we can't have another debate like this. We can't. This is not in Trump's favor to continue to have debates where the moderators are going to debate Trump along with Kamala Harris. I mean, I think that the moderators had more comebacks for Trump than Kamala Harris did, right? The moderators were debating Trump better than Kamala was debating Trump. Kamala did not do a good job tonight, okay? Most of the attacks that Trump took were coming from the moderators, not even Kamala. That's the crazy part about it. That's the frustrating part about it. So, no, we can't have that again. Okay, we can't have that again. And I think the way to do that is to demand that it's on Fox News. So, that's my takeaway. I personally think that I would like to see another debate. It just cannot be on these terms. Ultimately, I don't think it's going to move the needle as of right now, but we will see. So, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and call it a night. I'm going to eat. I'm going to go to bed, sleep on it, wake up tomorrow, and start covering the news as per usual. So, let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.